Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today I'll talk about last Epoch, especially the recently released 0.9 multiplayer patch, and whether it's worth buying in its current state. Now, last Epoch is a ARPG developed by 11th Hour Games, and it's currently in its kind of last patch before the actual release, so 0.9. And next up comes 1.0. It has been in development for quite a while now. As a little background, I've been playing this game for around about 1,000 hours spread out over the last, I would say, 4 years. And recently they definitely picked up steam. So with this patch, there's basically the new multiplayer release. A lot of people have been waiting for this. They don't want to play in single player. They want to have an economy. They want to play with their friends. And on that real quick, there has definitely been a little bit of a miscommunication here. Trade is not implemented yet. It will be in between 0.9 or 1.0. But right now you can play with your friends. And I guess having a game online finally also means that people can just cheat items in an editor. Now, this is not a sponsored video. This is basically just an opinion piece of what I've been seeing and what I've played myself. And as we all know, it's very subjective whether a game is good or bad. So just take that, as always, with a grain of salt. You can watch the video through my lens and then apply your own opinion over it. Before we get into what I like and dislike, real quickly, a class overview here, because that's pretty important for a lot of ARPG players. There's 5 classes you can choose from. Now, there's 5 classes in total, which each of them having a subclass that you can kind of choose at around about level 20. First up, we have the Acolyte, which as subclasses has the Necromancer or the Lich. Necromancer is your usual summoner, whereas Lich is more of like a poison and self-harm kind of build with like poison auras and reapers and stuff like that. We have the Primalist, which has pretty interesting classes. First up, the Beastmaster kind of revolves around having animal companions around you that mostly do the damage. We have Shaman, which is more of your elemental caster, and we have Druid, where you usually swap stances, so you transform yourself into another animal. We have the Mage, which has 2 subclasses right now, the Sorcerer and the Spellblade. One thing I want to mention, I guess, is there are right now 3 subclasses that are not released yet. They will be introduced with 1.0. So right now, for example, Rune Master or Warlock, and I think the third one was Falconer, are not playable. As for Mage, we have the Sorcerer here, which is your usual stereotypical caster, and you have the Spellblade, which is sort of like a hybrid build between attack and spell. And we have the Rogue, which currently also only has 2 subclasses. Number 1, the Blade Dancer, which is sort of like dagger style assassiny, and Marksman, which is more ranged and bow. Then we have the Sentinel, which is mostly your tanky melee class. You have Void Knight here, which goes more into sort of like replicating its own attack with like echoes. It's kind of weird. Then you have Forge Guard, which can summon, for example, weapons and armors, and is also kind of like fire-based. And then you have the Paladin, which is mostly like healing and defensive. Then we have the usual item system. As you can see it here, you have weapon, shield, body armor, helmet, all the good stuff with different, for example, legendaries, with magic items, rare items, you know them all. We're going to talk about them later a little bit more. Something interesting is the idol system. These are basically items that you kind of have to like organize within this idol space. And this is a really interesting min-maxing factor, sort of how you actually fit them in here. What's the best combination? So that is also something that I really, really like that we're going to touch about a little bit later. As for skills, this game does not only have like skill slots, it also has full specialization for every single skill. That means your skills level up, but as well as that, you can also allocate passive points for your skills, up to 20. So that is basically up to 5 skills that you can have specialized. And they are not just like your cookie cutter, a little bit of increased attack damage or whatever. That is obviously also in there, but there is stuff that can completely change the way a certain skill feels or plays, which keeps the game really fresh. But on top of that, you also have your passive skill. So there is a passive skill tree where you can allocate points per level as well. So skills level up, you level up, and whenever you level up, you can allocate points in here. These are your cookie cutter, basically passives that affect your character globally. For example, in the Sentinel class here, we start off in the Sentinel tree, and then once we have ascended into either Void Knight, Paladin, or Forge Guard, you can see here I mastered Paladin. That means I have access to the Paladin passive tree right here as well. Now, one cool thing about this is that even though I haven't mastered Forge Guard or Void Knight, I can still allocate points, however, only up till the half point. So all the juicy points after you can only get in the class that you mastered. Now, with the most cookie cutter stuff out of the way, I want to quickly talk about what I liked first. Number 1, this game is easy to learn, hard to master, which for me personally is the golden standard for a fun ARPG. Now, with something like Path of Exile, which is my main game, I love it to death, but it is definitely hard to learn, extremely hard to master, which basically has the outcome that people very much rely on content creators to kind of help them out at the start. It's very hard to get into. You can't just pick a skill randomly. This game is extremely forgivable when it comes to that. You might be thinking about, oh, maybe I need a build guide for my first character. You really don't. Of course, you're going to have an advantage if you do, but it is definitely viable in this game to just pick a skill and play through the campaign with it. And obviously, the results will vary, but you will not get stuck anytime soon. And you can always respec points easily. So even if you made mistakes during your progression, you can just redo that later. And I want to go into this a little bit more because this seems like kind of a no-brainer, but it's actually not that hard to do. Very often, if you want to make something accessible to more people, you have to water stuff down. But this game is still very, very intricate, and that mostly comes through its itemization, which we're going to go over next. Now, the itemization in this game is incredible. First up, I want to talk about the crafting real quick. The crafting is very, very bare bones. Every item has 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes for up to a total of 4 mods. And the way you make these items, let's for example say, I just found this item, is simply with these shards right here. Now, you can, for example, just simply say, okay, there is an open prefix, mana is a prefix, I really want that mana. And all you have to do is you have to craft it. You can add that affix at any time. Now, the way you achieve this is with forging potential. And down here, you can see this item has 34 forging potential. The more you craft onto this item, the less your forging potential will get, until you get to 0, at which point you cannot further craft the item. However, until then, you can basically do with the item whatever you want, which makes it easy to make decent items at least, and really, really hard to make good items. However, this means that it won't just be a lottery system until you get an item that's kind of like what you want, and then maybe you hit the jackpot and you're gonna get it. No, you can deterministically craft what you want. Now, there's a lot more to this. There's glyphs, there is runes that you can add to it. This system is really, really clever and really well made. However, this would not fit into this video as a whole. I just want to tell you that this crafting system is awesome. Now, what this crafting system incentivizes you to do, however, which is pretty clever, is magic and rare items are actually really valuable because you can't just craft these items from scratch. For example, if I wanted to get this item just to where it is right now, I would already be on like, I don't know, 5 forging potential, and then it would be almost over. However, I just found this item and I'm like, okay, I want strength on it. So I picked the strength right here. I have Glyph of Hope, which is just makes it, I have more chance to lose less forging potential. Add the affix, there it is. Now I have strength on my item. And now I can increase the tier. And now there's different things here that would be a little bit too complex. But what I want to tell you is you find stuff on the ground and rares are actually valuable, which a lot of ARPGs struggle with. Usually when you have a crafting system, at some point it just takes over. You're just crafting it. Everything you find on the ground is just completely worthless. And that doesn't happen in this game also because there is exalted items. Now, for example, if you see here, this item is purple. What does that mean? You see this purple mod right here that says plus 260 armor. This is a mod that is above tier 5. So that the tiers of item mods usually go from tier 1 to tier 5, with tier 5 being the strongest. However, you can go further, tier 6 and tier 7, and you can only find these on the ground, which incentivizes you even more to just slay monsters instead of just crafting and doing nothing else. Another big thing that this game has is the unique and legendary system, which incentivizes you even more to kill monsters instead of just crafting in your hideout. It's actually valuable and you actually find good loot on the ground. Another thing is even magic items are valuable because of how the crafting system works. So these fragments right here, for example, the strength I just crafted, gets made by these affix shards. And the way you get these affix shards is either you find them on the ground, or what you can do as well is you can use the rune of shattering to destroy items and get those shards. Now, some of these shards are really easy to get. Some other shards extremely valuable. For example, +2 level, for example, you have +2 to rebuke, is incredibly hard to get, but you can get them on, for example, magic items. Now, magic items are usually like, there are 1 or 2 mod items. You wouldn't usually pick them up. You would just hide them on your loot filter or whatever. In this game, not, because if you find a magic item that has this mod right here, you can actually Rune of Shatter it and get that very valuable affix shards. And all of this, so let's shatter this real quick. As you can see here, I just got some shards. All of this plays together into an economy where magic items, rare items, and next up unique items are incredibly valuable even in endgame. With that said, let's talk about uniques real quickly. What happens in a lot of ARPGs is you have an economy where 99% of legendaries or uniques or whatever you call it are usually worthless when it comes to endgame gearing. Some are just good for leveling, some are good for nothing at all, and some are best in slot. However, Last Epoch handles this differently. There is legendaries and uniques. There's a difference between them. So an item starts at being a unique. So for example, the item I have right now is usually just the bleeding heart, and it has these kind of mods, right? However, as you can see right here, this is a little bit different. There's an additional mod on top in kind of this pink color. To explain what this pink color is, we have to talk about legendary potential. So as you can see here, Muramaha's healed legendary potential 1 up there. What does this mean? Let me get to the left side again. What does this mean exactly? Well, this item used to have legendary potential 1. Now you can combine a unique with a exalted item, so one of these pink items, to form a legendary. And in this case, I combined it with another amulet that had 4 mods, and it randomly chose 1 mod of that item to get copied onto the unique, which means that you can make extremely strong legendary items. So basically you take a unique item, you combine it with a rare or exalted item, and you make something like this. And that can get pretty damn crazy. Now you might think, well, isn't this just like D3, where at some points you just need primal legendaries and all the normal legendaries are useless? Well, no. The way this system works is there is a effective level for legendary potential, and it's a little bit complicated. All you have to know is the lower this number is, the higher the chance that an item gets legendary potential. So basically what they do is they balance this out to where the weakest, all the leveling, for example, the leveling uniques, have the highest chance to get legendary potential, and all the incredibly strong items that are already strong are very unlikely to even get 1 legendary potential, right? Like an item like this could, for example, get 4 legendary potential, so it could get 4 additional mods. However, it's not like incredibly strong, so it would just kind of even the playing field between an item like this and some incredibly strong endgame item. And what this kind of comes out to is an incredibly fun item hunt, where just because you see an item that you usually wouldn't consider doesn't mean that it's completely useless. For example, this item right here, probably not gonna get me to play a build with it. It only has 1 legendary potential, maybe it has 0. But if, for example, I got lucky and I got 3 legendary potential on it, wow, that is 3 extra stats. That might be build defining. So yeah, so far, awesome, right? Rare items, itemization in general. However, the best thing about this game is the loot filter. First thing you have to know is items drop identified, which means it is possible to actually filter for mods in this game. So if you go to gameplay, down here, manage loot filters. You can basically add rules. You can make your own loot filter. There's rules for this. You can look this up in YouTube videos or probably figure it out yourself. But basically, you can craft your own loot filter. For example, you can say item type. You can say, I'm fishing for a certain armor, and it is a body armor, right? Then you do confirm. Subtype, I want this to be exactly the augury plate because I really want that mana region. And you can even filter for certain mods on that item. So it is extremely deep. You can color it however you want. You can customize it. Completely just kind of change how items are presented in this game. And this sort of thing is only possible because you can just search for mods on the ground. The items drop identified, so if an item has +2 to shield throw, which I really want, then it's going to show. I don't have to unID'd with a scroll of wisdom or something before. And this kind of just feeds into an extremely fun gameplay loop. And then last but not least, let's talk about the endgame systems that this game has. So you come out of the campaign, what are you going to do now? Well, right now, there's 3 big activities that you can do. Number 1 is the monoliths, which is sort of like the Atlas in Path of Exile, kind of like your main way to play the game. And the way the game handles this is through these regions. These are called monoliths. Now, whenever you go to a monolith, for example, let's go to the Fall of the Outcasts. Each of these has a distinct boss with a distinct loot table. A lot of uniques, you can farm for them very easily. So you go to the monolith right here. You can choose normal. Now, this you can unlock once you have completed all of the monoliths ones. You can actually go legendary and go area level 100. You can push corruption, which basically makes the areas harder and harder, but you get better loot. However, just as a baseline to kind of show you how this looks like, I choose the legendary right here. Now, this is already a web of clusters that I've made. I think it starts down here. Yeah, this is where you start. This is basically what you would see at the start. So now all of these are areas that you have to conquer in order to, I don't know, unlock the next one. So whenever you pick on this, this is an echo, right? So it's basically just a map, and it gives you an enemy downside. So for example, in this case, enemies have increased movement, speed, and damage, blah, blah, blah. But you get rarity, you get experience, and there's certain echo rewards. So whenever you finish an echo, you get a fixed reward. Those can go from just crafting stuff all the way up to legendaries, and you can even farm certain legendaries. For example, there is certain monoliths that, for example, just focus on legendary helmets, so you can very much pinpoint to the items that you want. Whenever you complete an area, you can see up here the screen here, you get stability, and whenever this stability is full, you can fight the boss. And when you fight the boss, what happens is you get a random boss unique, which can be either a common one or an extremely rare one. And what you get as well is a blessing. So if we look over here again, you can see right here, Fall of the Outcast, there is a blessing. So for example, here, this blessing gives me 22% increased unique drop rate. There's other stuff like experience, gold, and so on. A lot of these, however, are character-based. So for example, the Black Sun right here gives me increased leech rate. This is not just for this monolith, this is global. So unlocking these monoliths over and over again, you can actually customize your character. As an example right here, from Reign of the Dragons, I get 83% increased physical damage. From the Age of Winter, I get chance to shred enemy physical resistance. So the character customization basically never really stops. And if you do the hard monolith, the one I just showed you with level 100, these mods get even higher. And these blessings are random, which makes it so you're incentivized to complete the boss over and over, even if you already maybe have all the boss uniques. Next up, let's show you the dungeons. They need a key to enter. Now, if you right click, it will directly get you on the minimap towards where you have to travel. You travel there. The dungeon I'm going to show you right now is the one where I talked about the uniques and legendaries. You get extra mods on your uniques, blah, blah, blah. That is where you can get that, where you can acquire those extra mods. And this area is one of the most infamous bosses as well, which is called Julra, which we're not going to do right here. I'm just going to quickly show you how this works. We put in the dungeon key. Now, these you can farm in monoliths. They're not like common, but they're not also super rare, so you don't have to like save them or anything. There's different tiers right here. Since I just basically started this character, I'm only on tier 2, but this can go up to level 100. And at level 100, this is really rough to do in general. So there's just like different levels. Even if you just started out at level 55, you can already try it. Just to give you my opinion about these dungeons, I think they're absolutely awesome. They're a very, very fresh take on the whole genre. Love it. It kind of feels like raids almost. Currently, there are 3 different ones in the game, with hopefully more to come in the future. And then at the end, we have Arena. I'm not going to show this off. Everybody knows how this works. This is basically your greater rifts, basically where there's wave of enemies coming at you, and there's usually a leaderboard. I think right now they're disabled, but they're going to be up again, where you can kind of see, okay, this guy made it up to wave 400. This guy made it up to wave 403. So it's pretty cool. I usually find it pretty much a snooze fest, but if you like that, it's also in the game. All right, but enough praise. Let's talk about what I did not like about the game. A lot of these things have been in the game for a long time, so I'm not just nitpicking. These are things that have not been addressed until now, and I really hope they will. First up, I'm going to talk about the mana system. So the way mana works in Last Epoch is you basically have your mana globe right here, and it is a resource, right? As you can see here, my main skill, which is Hammer Throw, kind of like a Hammer Dim build, does not really take much mana, and that is because I kind of spec'd around it. In the skill nodes right here, there is certain things that makes it so your mana cost is lower, which is actually very interesting because this game does not have any mana flasks, which I think is a cool skill. That's a cool way to balance skills, right? You don't just cheese it with a mana flask and everything's fine, yada, yada, yada. That's cool. However, the problem comes when you have stuff that actually costs a lot of mana, because there aren't really good ways to increase your mana regen. Now, there are mana regeneration mods in the game. For example, right here, I get 27% increased mana regen. Now, the base is 8, and with this 27, I go up to 10. You might think that might make a difference, but it really doesn't. First up, these items only have 4 slots, so it's already very competitive what you want in there. A prefix, for example, where the mana regeneration is right here, I could get up to 60% increased damage, which I don't have because I just wanted the mana regen. Probably not going to need it later. In total, this doesn't do much. I go from 8 to 10 mana regen. But where it gets really bad is something like Mage. This is just an old Mage that doesn't really have anything spec'd into it, level 60. So right now I don't have much mana, but just know that Mage just kind of revolves around getting a lot of mana, either for defense or because there's certain abilities that get quadrupled in effect or tripled in effect if you have a certain mana threshold. So you're kind of incentivized to get a lot of mana. Now, what do you think happens to the mana regen, for example, if you go from 100 mana to 1,000 mana? Well, the problem is nothing happens. To understand why this is a problem, let's quickly do the math. So let's say on our last character, we had 10 mana regen. All right, we have 10 mana regen, and let's say, because it's easier, we have 100 mana. That means that it takes 10 seconds to go from 0 to 100 mana back, right? Pretty easy. 100 divided by 10. All right, now, if we had 1,000 mana, which is what for example, Mage has, we would have 1,000 still divided by 10 because the base mana regen does not go up. That means for a Mage, it takes 100 seconds to go from 0 to full. What this means is that you're shoehorned into certain skills. There's certain skills that are just there to regain mana. For example, Focus, which is literally just you expand all your mana. Let's, for example, say, let's see if I can quickly figure out, yeah, Meteor costs a lot, right? What this means is you have a skill that you press, but you just stand there and regain your mana. That is your whole cycle. You do fun things, and then you have to stand there for a prolonged time. I can't even do it right now because I don't have cooldown on this. And then you would have to stand there and regain your mana. I don't have any problems with these skills, but the problem currently is there's no way to gain mana regeneration naturally, so this is going to be most of your playstyle. And the same can be true for certain rogues, because they have very expensive skills, and then they have certain auto-attack-like things where they just hit a few times and get a little bit of mana back up, which is fine on its own, but it just feels incredibly bad to play. I don't want to misrepresent this here. This is not all archetypes by any means, but it is in the game, and it currently makes certain classes a lot worse than others. And it also means that the best builds are usually the ones that don't use any mana at all, or that have some kind of cheesy way to get around that, because no efficient build just wants to stand there every 3 seconds and regain its mana. So making mana meaningful, really cool, but please give us more options. Now, another thing I absolutely hate in this game are layouts. This is just a little bit of stream footage from today. The layouts in this game are just so messy. There's so much backtracking if you go into the wrong direction. And do you see the direction arrow here? It can be completely confusing. In some layouts, it will literally show you there, but then there's like a wall there, and it doesn't take that into account, so you have to go all the way around. It is very obnoxious. It is incredibly obnoxious. I don't know how to describe it here. I don't want to go in depth about all the layout changes that I would make. In total, I just want to say that it feels like every single one of these is just a maze and just too damn long and too like convoluted. The quests are also quite repetitive in the monolith, which I don't mind too much. But in general, it's just, I don't know, very boring. Some of the layouts are just full of monsters, and some of the other layouts are just completely empty, and I just can shield rush through without killing anything. And the last thing that is not ironed out right now, surprise, surprise, is the multiplayer that just came out. Right now, it's quite unstable, especially if you're playing in a party. There's some rubber banding going on. Some movement skills aren't as smooth. Some skills get interrupted sometimes. It is definitely not perfect right now. As 2 people, it was still mostly fine. We had some lag, some weird desync issues, but when it came to 3 or more people, pretty damn rough. I would definitely say wait out a little bit more on that. There was kind of a debacle in the first few days where you couldn't log in at all. I think they mostly kind of made that work. Right now, there was like the biggest spike ever with 40,000 players, and mostly everything has been ironed out. So I don't think it has anything to do with how many people are there. Just the infrastructure wasn't perfect. I really hope they're going to iron out those bugs, but right now, multiplayer is a little rough. Well, this all culminates into the final question, which is it actually worth buying? Obviously, subjective. I would say yes, if you want a fun and engaging RPG. This game has a lot of fresh takes. It can definitely stand on its own. It is not a Diablo clone. It's not a Path of Exile clone. It is simply a very interesting take from a dev team that really cares. You can see this because the first thing they put out is all the systems. They were really good. In terms of graphics, it doesn't seem like they care as much. It became polished over time, but it was definitely rough at the start. They really care about the game itself and not just graphic beasts that want to push out something to appease a normal crowd and a normal audience. You can feel that they want to give ARPG veterans what they want, and that definitely shows. However, I would say don't buy it if you want to play it with friends or you need trade. Right now, if you want to play in a party, especially more than 2 people, it is going to be rough. You're going to have to be fine with bugs. If you're fine with that, totally get it, but it still does have the beta vibe for sure. Or if you need trade, trade is not out right now. There is going to be trade. Just in case you don't know, there has been an update post where they said they heard everybody and they're going to implement a very cool system that we're going to see probably over the coming months, but it's not in the game right now. If this down here is you should definitely wait, just see how things go and kind of like put it on your wish list or your to-do list for later. If you're somebody like me who just wants a cool and engaging RPG experience, then you're definitely going to like this and you can basically buy it immediately. I will say this game feels in beta already better than a lot of games on release. But yeah, that's my take on Last Epoch. I'm going to release a video about the handwritten video soon. Hope you could learn something. Maybe it could help you with my decision. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.